back. Third coffee is a charm. I asked a question a bit earlier regarding who in the room is a backend developer. Do we still have at least one backend? Oh, quite a few. Nice. Interesting. Guys, this is a topic about micro frontends, no microservices. You sure you? Okay, just kidding. Okay, so I'm not going to talk too much about this topic because we all know that when complexity grows, we need to dissect it, divide it impera, and what's the best way to divide a huge problem than dividing it into tiny, tiny micro problems, right? Now, I'm not sure if the micro problem is as small as we think, but we're going to let Rareș tell us all about that. Rareș, stage is yours. First time at the developers, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, can you hear me? Yeah, it actually is. Hello, guys. And I mainly work with .NET and Angular. But this is not why I'm here today. I'm here because I'm a big fan of micro frontends. And let me start by telling you a small story. The first time I talked about this subject, I went right into it. 20 minutes of just ranting about the advantages, the disadvantages, why you should not use them. And then after about 20 minutes or so, somebody finally stopped me and they were like, so yeah, are these like some shared library or something? Yeah, this is the moment when I realized that not everybody knows what micro frontend is. And I actually did a small questionnaire here at the developers, and most people that I asked don't know what the micro frontend is. So I'd like to take a few minutes of the presentation to introduce this concept, if you don't mind. So, what's micro frontend? Behind me, you can see a big frontend, our nice monolithic white frontend, and we want to take it and break it apart into smaller, bite-sized chunks. It's a very good thing, and I see why people would associate this with shared libraries, because it's similar in nature, but this is how you should view shared libraries. You usually use them to share components or bigger modules of the applications between multiple applications, as opposed to micro frontends, which can be their own thing. And the disadvantage is that each app has its own version of the shared library. So if you update it, you have to update it for all of them. This is the big difference between micro frontends and shared libraries. Micro frontends are their own thing. They are there in your site, and they are hosted as their own applications. You don't have one application that just uses different libraries. No, you have 4 applications in our case here. And they can be hosted, as I said, on the same environment, different ports, or entirely on different environments. You can compartmentalize them, Dockerize, do the whole thing, what you want. You have the freedom to do it. And about now, people usually stop and ask me, how is this similar to iframes, or is it at all? No. I myself have had bad experiences with iframes in the past, and I know a lot of developers are quite iffy about iframes, so let me put this to rest. They are not similar. Iframes are just some widgets, let's call them, that you put in your front end. Micro frontends are a whole other thing, and they do not relate. What you should be comparing micro frontends to is actually microservices. And I'm not saying this just because they sound similar. I might switch the name here and there a few times. It's not intentional, but it can be. But this is actually the best way to view them. They actually started because somebody at some point thought, I like what the microservice does to the big API. Can you do the same for the front end? And yes, you can. It's the same concept. Okay, it's not a one-to-one comparison. There are differences. But for our purpose, it's similar enough so you can kind of look at them as microservices, so it's easier to understand. And this is the crash course on micro frontends. Let's now see why we should or should not use them. The first thing is how we transition to them. Is it magic? Well, no, it's a lot of work. And we might not like that a lot of work, but it's there. And the way to start, I actually have not one question if we should start, but rather 3 of them. We have the big one, should I actually do it? This is the most important question. Do you actually want to commit to micro frontends? Do you want to implement them? And because it's such an important question, I leave it for the end, so it's fresh in your memory. And we'll go straight to the other question. How do I split my front end? This is a very good question. So we answered the first one. The answer is yes, we're doing it. Okay, how? We have our big monolithic architecture. We've been working on this website for 10 years. And let's just take a dummy website here, our generic site. It has some nice components. It has banner, a burger menu, some nice graphs. It even has a second page. Very cool. We can see it. It's a big app. How do we break it? For the purpose of easily illustrating this, I chose to color each micro front end with a different color. You'll see them at some point. So what people tend to do when they start, they see like, okay, we have two different pages. They are different. Can they be different micro front ends? Yes, yes, they can. But then, as we see, there is some overlap there. We have the same generic site title banner. Can that be a micro front end? Sure. We have three of them now, right? And they kept seeing similar things. The same thing for the menu. Make the new micro front end. And they get to this point. It's nice, I suppose. And they just keep going, because we can keep going. It's not a bad thing to keep going. And then each smaller section becomes a micro front end. Still, looks very nice. And this is the point where people start questioning, okay, should we go further? Is it enough? And well, then Bob comes along. We all know Bob. We all have a Bob, or had a Bob in our teams at some point. In Romanian, we call him Dorel. That's not relevant. Yeah, and he sees this, and he's like, I can do better. And he starts doing better. Oh no, now each graph, it's its own micro front end. Each button, the own micro front end. And okay, at this point, the rest of the team is like, okay, maybe we should stop now, should we? And Bob is like, no, I have to prove something. We can break it even further. And then it starts looking something like this. Everything is micro front end because everything can be a micro front end. This is the problem when it comes to splitting it. There is not a perfect way of doing it, and people tend to start doing it, they continue doing it, and they don't know when to stop until it looks like this. And trust me, if you had to work with something like this, it's not usable. It's really complex. There are a lot of ways, and you should not get to this point. The best way to start is with something easy. For example, this. You have 3 micro front ends. The generic one, the host, and 2 smaller ones. You can have more for each section. But still, it doesn't mean that you have to get to this to start. This is a valid starting point. It's a big monolithic application, still, but the thing about micro frontend is you don't have to start big. You just have to start. The advantage is that they are modular. You can build upon it. You are afraid to break that 10 years old website into smaller things because you might break it. Okay, don't. Make it your big main micro front end, and then just keep going. When you need to add the new functionality, add this micro front end, and keep going, and you keep going. And eventually you'll see that you can break it further, you're not afraid to do it, you've already done it to some extent, you're used to it, and it just keeps flowing, and it's better. But now it's actually easy one, just use module federation, and we can skip this question, but for the sake of argument, let's look at the different solutions. I listed here some of the most popular solutions for the most popular frameworks that we have, and we have Angular Elements and Angular NX for Angular, Coanta and Bit for React, and also single SPA and the Podium for Vue. These are some good solutions, and I cheated a bit because theoretically single SPAs can be used for each of these 3, but I put it there so people know about it. These are all good technologies. They specialize in their specific framework, but they come with a big disadvantage. They are technology specific. If at some point you change from Angular to React, you'll have to change from Elements to Coanta, let's say, and it's not easy. So what I advise using instead is this, module federation. This is a very nice thing. And why I'm saying this? Because first, it's easy to configure. It's not hard to start to it, and after you started, if you realize that you don't like it, you can easily revert back to it. It's also relatively easy to use compared to the others. Most of the others are actually built upon this, and because of that, this kind of started becoming the standard. Chances are, when people talk about using micro frontends, let's say 70 to 80% of the time will talk about using either module federation or something that's built upon it. But still, with all these good reasons, the main reason is that it's technology agnostic. After you worked 4 years in Angular with module federation and you switch to React, you still have those 4 years of experience with module federation. That's the main advantage. And it's very good. And as I said, it's simple. It basically works on the host and remote principle. You have a host, which is a micro front end, that basically uses remotes. It consumes something that the remote exports. And a remote exports something or itself that is consumed by a host. Pretty simple. Until you realize there's a third thing, bidirectional hosts, which are basically both the host and a remote. This, even though might seem very common, they are not as common. They are mainly used when you have a big standalone site or web app and you want to use it inside another one. So you have your big landing page, which is usually your host, and then that host starts loading other remotes, and at some point you realize that you have, I don't know, some shared microservices that you want to use in more remotes, so you make those remotes bidirectional hosts, and then you just put the remotes there. It's very nice. It's like with Lego. You just put them there and they work. That's the best part about micro frontends. This is also how you configure something with module federation. It uses Webpack, so it should be familiar to some extent. We have the basic configuration here. I won't get into everything. We have the name, which is self-explanatory, the file name, which is the entry point in your micro front end. So basically, what your host uses to enter your remote. And then you have the exposes, all the things that your remote expose. It can be the big app container, or it can be some, I don't know, generic button, generic drop-down item, whatever. You can put more things there. And then you have the remotes. Remotes, again, easy. What remotes are used by the host? You just put them there, and then the host will be able to use them. And then this is important. You have shared. This is the most important thing, and I really cannot emphasize how important it is, because we have to understand. Now, instead of having one application with 9 dependencies, we have 4 applications with 9 dependencies. Okay, some of them will overlap. And guess what? If they are not listed there in the shared things, they will be downloaded more times. They will be exported every time. And it starts being very cumbersome. There's a lot of talk about how you should better do this and about how to optimize this. I will not get into it because when it comes to module federation, I don't have enough time now to talk about it. I actually plan to do another talk specific on module federation and how to use it. If you want to get started with it, I recommend you reading this book. Practical Module Federation is written by the pioneers of this technology, and it's very good. Now, this is as far as I'm willing to talk about module federation, because again, I recommend you use this technology, but this is not the point of our talk. The point of our talk is if you should use micro frontends. So let's spiral back to the first question. Should I actually do it? Yes, yes, you should. That's my response to this question, because this is the wrong question. It's not about what I want or what you want, it's about what your application needs. If you were to ask me if I want to use them, yes, I do. If you were to ask me if my application actually needs them, depends. This is not an easy answer, because this varies depending on your application. It's a very good solution for some, it's a very bad solution for some. It ranges wildly, and it can vary a lot. So what I'll do, I'll go through some advantages, and unfortunately some disadvantages as well with you, and we'll decide together at the end. So let's see. First, the biggest advantage that people continue bringing up, loosely coupled. Micro frontends are loosely coupled, yes. We all know what it means. We push solid every time. We have smaller modules. They are independent. They don't have any dependencies with one another. They are easy to maintain, and this is a very good thing. We want this, hopefully. And because they are so separated, we can always maintain them, we can change them, we can do whatever we need to do with them. But this also comes with a big disadvantage, and this is the biggest disadvantage. Whenever I bring up micro frontends to somebody, this is the first thing they tell me, and I've had this happen today at least twice when I told people about my presentation. No shared components. Yes, this is the biggest drawback. You don't have shared components, you don't have shared styling, you don't have anything shared between the micro frontends, theoretically. Now, again, if you need a button, a generic button, you implement it for one of the micro frontends, and you would like to use it in another one, good luck. You either implement it again, or you transition it to a different micro frontend that is only that button, and then you get to the Bob problem, or you get a component library. Yeah, this is a problem, indeed. It's the biggest problem, and people are still working on it. It's the same for styling. You can have one big style file. Not necessarily that you should, but the problem is that you can't. And this is also something that leads to my next point that people bring up. Not only that you don't have shared component, you don't have shared state. And whenever people tell me this, I actually think a bit, and I realize something. We, again, are trying to push solid as much as possible, for some reason. And this is not necessarily a bad thing, is it now? Because why would we need our different micro frontends to communicate to one another? We could use fenced-in data. They don't know about one another. They can have separate states. It's very good. Theoretically, what this does is force you to break your big monolithic application in a better way, because it imposes some limits. When you start breaking it, ideally, you should break it so that micro frontends don't relate to each other. They don't share the same data, they don't have dependencies on each other, and this is the best way to do it. But eventually in time, some business needs might change. That's understandable, and they might come to rely on one another, and for that, there are ways to mitigate this. Again, you can do event-based communication, you can do messaging queues, you can do some weird things with the API calls and signals and, I don't know, some sockets. You can do it. It's not nice, it won't be nice, but it can be done if needed to. So I don't see this as a downside. Also, you can use session storage. Local storage doesn't work because it's theoretically different application, but session works great. So that's also a good way to go around it. So still, is this a downside? Maybe, maybe not. But this is a very good upside, scalability. You have a strong foundation, and you can just build upon it whenever it's needed. You have a new functionality that needs to be implemented, build a new micro frontend for it. You have something that needs to change the micro frontend that does it. You have a micro frontend that's used in different areas, and then you have to change it a bit, but it will influence other areas. Yeah, well, just make a new one, you know, and you just keep going. You make a new one, you make a new one, and you can see the problem. This is not feasible in time. Even though it leads to very good scalability, it can be very easily abused. And it leads to the Bob problem again, added complexity. Everything is a micro frontend now, even though not everything should be. This can get out of hand. It's not a problem in the first year, probably won't be a problem for the first 3 years. When you get to the 5th year and it starts looking like this, it's, yeah, people don't like it, and then it just keeps going. People should understand that whenever you use micro frontends, you should always look towards refactoring if there's a possibility for it, and you should try to design them so they're not dependent on each other. This is the biggest downfall. If you make them dependent on each other, at some point you realize that, oh, you can delete this micro frontend, it's not used anymore. And then you try to delete it, and then 5 more totally unrelated micro frontends start breaking, nobody knows what's happening, and the building is just burning. Yeah, it's basically that. You can, again, mitigate this problem with shared libraries, which might not be the best solution. It can work, but again, I don't recommend it. I recommend trying to not to get to this level of added complexity. And how you can do that is, again, have vertical teams. Everybody pushes vertical teams these days. You have one team, they have their own microservice, micro frontend, micro whatever. They are one vertical team, they can do everything. And this way you can have independent teams. If you have to scale up your project, just add a new team. It's easy. You can have projects with multiple teams. But at some point you need to get rid of somebody. Well, you can get rid of a vertical team a lot easier than something else. And this also leads to the best, or one of the best things from a business standpoint of micro frontends, which is varied technologies. Yeah, you don't have to do anything in the same technology. I myself love Angular, but there are people who don't. I don't understand why, but I know there are some. And the thing is, I don't have to look for experts in Angular if I want to get new people for a team that implements a microservice. I can get people to do it in React. Maybe there are some in my same company that do them on React, and they could do it. It's very nice because they just slide in there. And it's easier to find people, easier to find experts. And the best thing is that you can use the best technology for your job. Your 10-year-old website, it can use a micro frontend, sorry, with the best, hottest, newest technology. It just slides in there, and it's nice. And still, there's a downside that I hope you've seen coming. Additional maintenance. Yeah, again, you don't have one application now, you have 4 of them, 9 of them, N of them, whatever, and you need multiple environments, additional infrastructure. This is not the biggest problem. It's there, it exists, and depending on how you do deploys, it can be a good thing or a bad thing to have separate deployments. Again, it's there, we have to keep it in mind, but this actually leads to another problem, a resiliency problem, because now you don't have one failure point where the internet says, no, you can't get to this URL, whatever. Now you have 9 of them, 8 of them, whatever many of them you have. And this just keeps adding up, and it grows exponentially. So this is the real problem of additional maintenance. But I would say this is offset by the existence of true lazy loading. We, as front-end developers, love lazy loading. I do. But this is the true lazy loading, I'd say, because unlike the normal one, which sure, it's not there, it's not instantiated, it's not constructed, it's not there. This is actually not there. It doesn't exist until it's needed. It's on another URL, another port. The website doesn't know about this micro frontend that is used unless it's needed. So this is true lazy loading. So it can optimize the things. Or it can lead to performance problems, yes. This is what I've talked about earlier. This is mainly due to the shared things that you have. This can be easily mitigated, or not easily, but relatively easily mitigated if you do configurations well. And module federations actually have a very good thing called vendor federation that you can use. But if you are not good at it and don't know how to do it, and at the beginning most people are not, it will become very cumbersome for the user experience. This, I'd say, is one of the biggest things that can be overlooked as a disadvantage, but as of now, I'm still putting it there so people are aware of it. Now I'm getting to the part of the presentation that I dreaded making. This, people say they are hard to get into. Whenever I talk with people about them, somebody says, yeah, but how will I learn to do this? Yeah, but it's a bit different. Yeah, it's not really what I want. Yeah, a lot of points, and they just keep going. What if it doesn't work? What if this? What if that? And over time, I actually came to understand these are excuses that people are trying to make. Yeah, they might be valid, but they are still just excuses because people are scared to change it. And it's normal. We are people. We are resistant to change. We don't want to throw away what we've learned over our career and change to this new scary thing. It might be weird, it might not work for us, we might waste some time, and again, it's normal. But as Winston Churchill once said, to improve is to change. So to be perfect is to have changed often. I was scared of micro frontends when I first actually learned about them, and now I'm very excited about them. I'm still very resistant to change, but sometimes change is for the better. And we won't know until we try to get it. So I actually say this is a good thing because we got to the point in our careers where we can say we're at this level because we learn new things. We try new challenges. And this is a new challenge that needs trying. It needs resolving. Of course, it won't work for your application if you don't try to see if it will work. As of now, it's still an emerging technology. People are still trying to figure it out. It's continuously improving. It might not work now, but it doesn't mean that next year it won't. And the point is, don't be afraid of it. Now I'd like to conclude this presentation by going over the 3 responses of the question. Again, don't start big, just start. It's modular. You can change it later on. Don't be afraid to start. and try to use module federation. It might not be the solution you like, and you might change to something else, or you might just stick with it. But it's a good starting point. And the last one is not actually a response. It's actually a question, and this is the response. We don't have a yes or no answer, or at least not easily. We have advantages, disadvantages, mixed points, and as developers, I'd say it's our job to figure out what's best for our applications and what's best for us. And this is it, pretty much. Don't forget to apply uncommon thinking, I guess, and thank you for your time. Now, if you have any questions...
Thank you, Rareș. Great energy.
Thank you.
Congrats. Let's see if we have any question. We have one, and we actually have time just for one.
In practice, do you see that this introduces a new layer of testing for the front end? Because normally on the front end we would test end-to-end, for example, and this looks like it would need to also test integrations of the micro front ends, and who would be responsible in this case for the integration versus end-to-end testing?
Yes, this is actually a very good question. Theoretically, if you introduce new micro frontends, you wouldn't have to change the way you test it end-to-end because it's a seamless transition from the user. From the user viewpoint, it's the same thing if you have one app or multiple micro frontends, but you do have to sometimes test the infrastructure and how resilient it is, because sometimes there can be problems, and in that case, some parts of the application might not work as intended. So yes, this is indeed a valid point. It should be taken into account, but it's usually tested by the people that manage the big host, not the ones that try to integrate the microservices they develop into the bigger host. Okay.
I mean, you can still have both kind of tests, right?
Yeah,
like
indeed.
you have in service end-to-end or service level testing, and you also have integration testing. With micro frontends, you can also test in isolation a specific micro website, and then also test everything together.
Yeah, of course,
Only
you should.
Application shell and other things.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We are ready to go on with our next session.